Have a watch of this clip with Douglas Murray.
And we mentioned the hostages. Does at least that issue touch people's hearts?
Yes, although I think that, again, I predicted this in the beginning, that it would slip away. We'd get into that absurd and obscene tally that is always done in any conflict involving Israel, where, if 1,000 Israelis are killed, the world would sort of allow Israel to kill 1,000 Hamas. Anything beyond that, not allowed. Again, that's not how the British Army operate. That's not how the American Army operate. And we've not had in any recent conflicts, I think in any conflicts, the American or British armed forces being told to stop defeating a terrorist enemy because civilian casualties are too high. Very different in Fallujah, very different in Mosul only a few years ago. The ambition with Mosul was to eradicate ISIS, and that was pretty much achieved. But at what death toll? The world didn't care. With Israel, they care obsessively.
And when it comes to really talking about the hostages themselves?
Well, I mean, I'm horrified and amazed by the way in which the world has effectively forgotten that there are more than 100 Israelis who are still held hostage in Gaza. By the way, one of the great sadnesses of that, as well as the agony of the families, one of the great sadnesses of that is that as the months have gone on, and I was there at the Sheba when the first children were returned, and I've watched, Ben Gurion Airport and elsewhere as the posters of people who have been returned come down. And of course, we're now in this situation where there are, of course, still women and children in captivity in Gaza. But this terrible situation where, we're basically down to men. And something I've tried to stress to international audiences, among others, is, there's also no crime in being a man. There's no crime in being a 21-year-old young man from the Nova Party or a 74-year-old grandfather from a kibbutz. And much of the world seems to have forgotten that. And then there's the added thing, which I think is worth mentioning always, which is the obscenity of the interpretation of prisoner swaps, hostage swaps, as though there's any comparison between a Jewish child stolen from their home by Hamas
From their bed with the pajamas.
and some multiple murderer of Jews who's in an Israeli prison. And the idea that these are equals is obscene. And whenever I hear that language talked abroad, I always raise it.
Now we're talking...
Douglas is absolutely right that people have a very short memory. It also makes the case for maybe Israel going more comprehensively and quickly at the start, because the world was in the mood for Israel to do a response, and now they're getting tired of Israel fighting and having to, put up with that, even though at the same time they don't seem to get bored of countries like Ukraine fighting. But anyway, he's right, and it is so disgraceful that there's any equivalence being made between the hostages and the prisoners that Israel trades. And we also, as Rabbi Friedman, Manis Friedman, has said on our podcast on a number of occasions, hostage deals, as much as we absolutely want to get all the hostages returned, we pay a very high price for trading murderers, Arab murderers, and letting them go in return for hostages. Much as I'm delighted for all the hostages that do get released. Sinwar was released as one of 1,000 Palestinians released when Shalit was traded and released from Gazan Hamas control. I absolutely want to see all the hostages returned. The concern is, if you do a deal and release Arab murderers for hostages, you're creating a hostage industry. You're telling them that taking hostages pays. In some ways, you make all of Israel hostage. It's why America had the principle of we don't negotiate with terrorists. This doesn't mean that we can't, that there can't be ways to release them. It's just a question of strategy. In the Entebbe raid, Israel just went in with force and might and took back the hostages. These are extremely painful and difficult conversations to have. And people often ask me, well, what would you feel if it was your child? And to that I say, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not speaking as some kind of any authority or making recommendations. I'm just sharing with you what has been taught to me as a moral principle. Sometimes moral principles can mean there's a lot of pain in the process. But it doesn't mean that we can just look the other way. I'm Ollie Annisfeld and you're watching JTV. Hi everybody, thanks for watching. If you want to watch another one, click here. If you want to subscribe to stay up to date with all the latest JTV content, click here. And if you're feeling really keen, you can click the join button down below underneath this video, where you can get perks including early access to new videos and private live discussions with me, where we can talk about JTV content and strategy moving forward, and I'll get to hear from you. Thanks again for watching.